Greetings and salutations, our Sound Mind family. So good to be with you one more time. I am Jay Gideon Winfrey. I've had the blessing of being your host for season 6, and this is the last episode of the season. And I just want to thank you all so much for the support and just the love that y'all have shown, not just to me here at Sound Mind, but what you've done for the whole Hope TV network. Y'all have been so supportive of all of our shows here, and we just thank God to be able to elevate and get to this point. And I just want to say from my heart to you all, thank you so much for your support. And I want to make certain that we finish strong to carry us between season 6 and season 7. So let's just jump right on in, because this is a continuation from the last episode when we talked about love in 3D, okay? And when we talked about love in 3D, remember what we talked about was love basically in definition, doctrine, and distribution, okay? We touched on the first 6 attributes of love, which comes basically literally from the one entity that we know love to be in its entirety, which is God. We based it on the principles of 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 through 8, and this is basically the definition of love. I use this in my practice as a faith-based practitioner. As I've always said, I am faith-based and I make no apologies for it. I believe in the clinical aspect, so I believe in the psychology, but I yield to the theology in that regard. And I believe in blending the sacred with the secular, and that works for my population. I've seen marriages be healed. I've seen individuals be healed based on the integration of these principles. And so I will practice them until the day he calls me to that great therapy office in the sky. So we went over the first 6, okay? So let's go, the first 5. So I want to go over those first 5. The first attribute was patient. The second attribute was being kind. The third attribute was being not envious. Fourth, not boastful. And fifth, not arrogant, okay? So what we said was we're going to go through these attributes and we're going to do what's called the verb adjective assessment, meaning that if we say we love someone, or if someone says that they love us, then through the verb or our actions, we should be able to be described as such, okay? So that's why it's called the verb adjective assessment. Okay, so we want to keep it rolling so that we can cover all the content in this, the final episode for season 6, okay? So let's dive right on into the 6th attribute of love, which is not being rude, okay? Not being rude. And not being rude is defined as not offensively impolite or ill-mannered, okay? Not offensively impolite or ill-mannered. That's pretty much common sense right there. It's kind of hard to say you love someone if you're rude to them, okay? And it's been interesting because I've did premarital counseling with couples only to see them individually, and I would see an attribute that would be concerning, and it always was interesting to hear somebody say how they loved basically somebody's attitude or how rude they can be, okay? So I've seen some unique things come across my time as a therapist. And so what I'm saying is it's difficult for us to say that we love someone and we're rude to them. So you want to talk about not being offensively impolite or ill-mannered. So again, if someone says that they love you, can you describe them as not being ill-mannered based on the actions that you see them demonstrate? Can people describe you as such based on the actions that you demonstrate as it relates to not being rude, okay? Now, let's go to our 7th attribute, which is not self-seeking, okay? The 7th attribute of love is not self-seeking. And when we say not self-seeking, what we're saying by definition is not having a concern for one's own welfare and interest before those of others, not being self-serving, okay? So basically, when we talk about being not self-seeking, basically you're talking about if I love someone, if I profess love, if they profess it to me, then we're going to be selfless individuals. Are we always putting others in front of us, or is it always about us? Okay? It's always interesting in a marriage counseling dynamic when you start to see the selfishness come out in an individual. Here's a way that you often can look at it. Are you the first person or the only person that tends to apologize? That may be an indication of sometimes the relationship might be, one that may have a self-seeking attribute, okay? When a person is selfless, they're always looking out for the welfare of others. So be honest with yourself. Again, asking yourself, hey, the people that say that they love me, do they demonstrate the attribute of not being self-seeking? Okay? So again, our verb adjective assessment. Do I see the actions that can be described as such in that capacity? Okay? So let's keep on rolling here. We got the 8th attribute of love, which is not being irritable. All right? And by definition of not being irritable, what we're meaning by that is not showing or having a tendency to become easily annoyed or made angry, okay? Again, these are just assessment points that we may see are stronger attributes versus some of our more challenging. So it doesn't mean that we don't love individuals if we see this to be an area of possible growth. It's just a challenge to say, hey, I want to love you even more fulfillingly, so I want to work on that attribute. Or if we want to bring it up to someone's attention and say, hey, this may be something that we can work on together as we walk in love, okay? So when we talk about not being irritable, it doesn't mean that folks don't get on your nerves sometimes. I am a father of 4. I love my 4 children. But sometimes I can get a little irritable sometimes. Doesn't mean I don't love them. It doesn't mean I won't go to the deepest depths of Hades for them. But it means that in that human capacity, that my irritability is just an area. If I love them, I need to check that to make sure that I'm always reining that back in, okay? Because the key word here is not having a tendency to be easily annoyed. So when I'm telling you, as you all's therapists, as the House of Hope therapist, it's all right to be a little bit annoyed. It's okay. It doesn't mean you don't love your children or love your spouse if you're a little bit annoyed, but you just can't be easily annoyed or easily made angry. So you can be angry sometimes because the Bible does address that. It says, be angry, but sin not. So you can be angry and you can be annoyed, but it's not easily provoked, because I don't want you all to take this out of context and say, well, if I'm angered or if I'm annoyed, it means that I don't love. No, it just means that you need to stretch the attributes of being able to have more of a capacity for that, because we're being charged to love, not be perfect. There's only one entity that does that, and that's God, okay? So again, if people say that they love us, let's look at our verb and adjective assessment. Can I tell that you love me based on these attributes? Can I tell that you love me because you don't get easily irritated, that you don't get easily angered, okay? If you don't get easily angered or easily annoyed, then I think it's safe to check this one off the list, that you're loving from the capacity of the 8th attribute and not being irritable, okay? Now let's get with this number 9, because number 9 is where it gets real bumpy for a couple of minutes. Not keeping record of wrong. This one definitely makes me roll my eyes in therapy sessions because of the way that people tend to interpret this in terms of love. But for our definition in this particular episode, our final episode for season 6, we want to define not keeping a record of wrong as follows. It's basically what I say is, do we remember what happened? Yes. Do we remember it? Yes. Do we recall it? No. I'm going to say that again. Not keeping a record of wrong is we remember it, yes, because it happened, but we don't recall it in terms of we're not going to use this as a justification for retribution or justification to mistreat those that we love. That's what this means by not keeping a record of wrong, that we don't take someone's offenses and using it to justify us doing something in return. So if I love you, I don't keep a record of your wrongs, meaning that I'm going to run down the list of all the things that you did wrong. And we do that a lot of times in our relationships with our children, with our significant others. We love to talk about the things that they do wrong, and we don't really celebrate the things that they do right. One of the things that I charge my couples with is this. If you can have a 2-hour conversation about everything that went wrong and how you see yourself being offended by the person that you love, can you at least have a 2.5-hour conversation about everything that has gone right, that has kept you together for this amount of time, all the blessings that you have all around you? Because if you're going to have the conversation about what's wrong, I understand that, and that's necessary. But can you at least put more energy into looking at all the things that are right, because you're still together, you're still walking together, you're still seeing that purpose and that call and that drawing to be together. So just put more time into recognizing what it is that we do right instead of keeping a record of what we do wrong. And you'll see the difference in how you love one another and how that really brings you more closely together as a unit, be it in family or be it in a romantic relational regard, okay? All right, let's keep this thing going so that we can get everything touched on for this final episode. Attribute number 10, finds no joy in wrong, but rejoices in the truth. And what we mean by this particular definition is when somebody loves you, they don't let you do something wrong without addressing it. And they're extremely happy and promote when you're living and doing right. Again, people that love you are not going to let you do wrong and not address it. And they're going to celebrate when you do right. Now, something that comes up in my practice a lot for the men that come see me, I always tell the men that I work with, do an assessment of your circle, okay? A lot of times, you want men that are reflective of where you are and where you want to go. And I can use myself as an example, and it's only right if we're talking about love in that last episode of season 6 that I mentioned this. I have 3 men in my life that I absolutely love because they have held me down and anchored me and continue to. It's Devon Ward, Vincent Moore, and Dr. Carlos Brown. Those are what I call my 3. Jesus had James, John, and Peter as his closest. Ward, Vincent, Carlos, those are my closest because these are like-minded and like-spirited men that would not allow me to do anything wrong, and they wouldn't celebrate it. And they have been anchors for me in my journey as a man. They've been anchors for me as my journey as a husband, particularly Vincent. Vincent was the one that kept me focused and maintained when I was a single father and thinking that this was going to be pretty much from a place of transparency when I thought that it was just going to be me raising my boys. He was the one that reminded me that God made me to be a husband and a father, and he kept breathing that into me. And when my wife came into the picture, it literally manifested itself because he was not going to allow me to take my eyes off of that. He was not going to allow me to let go of something that he just saw inside of me in that capacity. It's because he loves me that he would not celebrate any wrongdoing on my behalf. And he always was extremely happy. All my 3 have always been extremely happy for me. And that lets me know that they love me, and I return the same to them in that capacity. And so if they ever get off track because I love them, I'm gonna say, hey, come here, that's not you. You know, I'm not gonna co-sign on any one of them doing anything that's wrong and outside of character, particularly with 2 out of my 3 being husbands. If any one of my brothers ever had an issue, we'll talk about it, but we have an understanding we're gonna send each other back home. So nobody's gonna set up a blind date or say, hey, let's go here where we know that there's a compromising situation because we love each other. So what I wanna say to my men that are watching, have men in your life that love you. I pray that you find men and that God will send you men that will love you in this capacity, because this is where we get isolated as men and we tend to break down, and this is when our family and communities break down because we have other men around us that will allow us to do wrong and not correct us. So when people say that they genuinely love you, they're saying that I find no joy in your wrongdoing, but I will celebrate and rejoice in the truth. They're gonna tell you the truth. Hey man, go home. Hey girl, go on and you got a good man at home. You got an attitude problem. Go on, get that thing right. Don't apologize to that man. You all right. That's what it is that you need when you talk about people to say, girl, I love you. Or man, you my man, I love you. Show it through your attributes. Show it through your actions. Again, if I can't describe you in this capacity, then I got a question when you tell me you love me, okay? So that's one that's really important. Again, we find no truth in wrong. I mean, we find no joy in wrong, but we rejoice in the truth, okay? All right, attribute number 11. This one gets a little heavy because it comes to the end. Attribute number 11 is love bears, believes, hopes, and endures all things. Bears, believes, hopes, endures all things. And how we define that is as follows. We say, basically, when a person say that they love you under this particular context, that this person is saying that because I love you, I will handle your off and bad days. I will see the best in you and your capacity and the fact that you're trying to do your best. I will desire to see you do your best, and I will suffer and tolerate patiently while you're working and walking on the path of doing your best. So that's what love does. It's bearing, believing, hoping, and enduring all things. Now, let me put an asterisk by this because I want to be very clear. Bearing, believing, hoping, and enduring all things does not mean being gullible and being exploited by people who have no intention on changing. And I want to say that with a very strong conviction. If a person wants to change, you'll see it in their actions and their attributes. You'll see the self-assignment, you'll see the conviction by their self-expressions because it will be reinforced by their words. And what I want to say to you as my audience, part of the Sound Mind family, and what I would say, and I have said to my very patients in therapy, we do not live our life based on promise. We live our lives based on productivity. So what I don't want you all to do is to sit and wait for a person based on their promises. You make your decisions on who's in your life based on productivity. How are they contributing? Do their words line up with their behaviors? And if they're not doing that, then we don't want to operate in bearing, believing, hoping, and enduring all things when the person on the receiving end has no intention to do that. I want to be very clear with that because I want you to be emotionally free and I want you in position to have all that God promised you in your friendly and romantic relationships. I want to make sure that we don't have people in the wrong place, or as I like to say in therapy, planes don't land on crowded runways. If you have the wrong people in your circumference on your runway, the blessing won't land. That plane is waiting to land, but you got the wrong people in your life occupying a place that they were never meant to occupy. And you're using bearing, enduring, and hoping all things as an excuse because of your own fear to move forward. So when you talk about loving someone, we do this, but we do it under the pretense that they're actually working on themselves as well, okay? So the 12th and the final one, the 12th attribute of love is love never ends. Basically, we stay at it and we put faith into our best efforts. Love never ends. Every day you have an opportunity to love. Every time that you open your eyes, every time that you open your mouth, you have an opportunity to demonstrate love. It never ends because it's an ongoing process. It's an ever-refining process in that dynamic.
Today, we're going to be making some pickles. Pickles is a Haitian condiment. You know, you have cabbage, carrots, shallots, bell peppers and onions, white vinegar, and you let it sit in the refrigerator and chill.
Severe weather can strike anytime, anywhere, but there's a simple way to stay safe. Hey, Jim Cantore here. I stay safe in dangerous weather by planning ahead. You can stay safe too with a few easy steps. Build an inexpensive kit with supplies for your family's needs. Write down important information like phone numbers and medications. Always talk with your family and remember any pets in your planning. Be ready, be safe. Start your plan today at ready.gov/plan.
How do you see those boarded up properties and eyesores in your local community?
Opportunity. This one NACA property propelled me, and now I have 8 outside of this. So technically I have 9. I have 9 different, and I got into the space of a landlord, of a homeowner. So without NACA, it wouldn't be possible.
So we've now completed all 12 attributes of love, which are right there mentioned in God's words when we talk about, you know, in that 1 Corinthians reference, okay? So it's all right there. Again, like in the words of Dr. Vodi Bakum, I don't write the mail, I just deliver it, okay? So what I want to do is I kind of want to give us a summation and understanding that love cannot sustain itself, okay? In today's modern society, one of the pop culture phrases that you tend to hear is people say, well, love is love. No, love is not love because love cannot sustain itself. What I say in my practice and what I believe personally is God is love because God has always had something to love. He's always had something to love. He always has had something to project it towards. So when you use that as the blueprint for your earthly relationships, if your love is not projected towards something, then it can't be love because it's not being exerted and given. Now, one of the things that I want to highlight in this last episode of season 6 is something that I practiced in my personal life. And it was something that when I realized what love really was, it was really convicting. I don't say to people that I love you too. Because what I realize is that based on what I learned here and how I apply this in my practice, When you say I love you too, you're basically saying I'm going to give you back a sentiment. And that's different from what love is at its core. When you say I love you, you're not making an expression of a sentiment, you're making a declaration. And you're saying that because I love you, you can look to see these 12 attributes that we talked about in the last episode and what we talked about today. So what's important is that when you say you love a person, understand you're saying that all 12 of these attributes you can expect from me. And if you can't give a person all 12 of these attributes, do you not understand? Do you not understand? That is the very reason why you don't need to say to a person that I love you. Because if you say I love you, you're saying that you're going to get all 12 of these from me. You're going to get me not being envious. You're going to get me not having an active record and recollection. You're going to get my patience. You're going to get my kindness. You're going to get me bearing and enduring all. And if you can't give that to a person, don't say that you love them. Say I like you a lot. Say I have a strong affinity for you. Say I'm feeling you. I'm digging you. But don't you dare say you love them if you're not prepared to do these 12. Because the beautiful part about what these 12 attributes mean and how they are explained is the fact that God gives it to us every day. And what my theory is, what I tell those in my practice is, the reason why this is so important for us to understand is that when you say that you love, you're literally putting God into your relationship, okay? And because God is love and he called us to be fruitful, to multiply, subdue, and replenish the earth, love multiplies itself. And you got to understand that when you tell a person that you love them, that the enemy hears that. And the enemy doesn't want God to multiply in any way, shape, form, or fashion, so immediately he attacks that relationship. And the reason why the enemy attacks the relationship is because he at one time had God's love and he lost it. So the one thing he doesn't want to do is see God multiplied out of that envy, okay? Out of that pride. So keep that in mind. When you say you love a person, if it gets thick and it gets rocky, like Paul said, count it all joy. Consider it not strange, this fiery trial that's upon you, because you've just sent a signal to the enemy that now you've put God in it. So when my wife tells me that she loves me, I said, I love you. And I often tell my wife, I love you. And when I say that to her, what I'm saying to her is these 12 things I will do, regardless of how you treat me in return, whether you give it to me or not. And she does. But it's not about what she gives me. It's about what I can project as a representation of the Most High himself. And that's why it's important for us to understand what love is at its core and at its concept, okay? Now, what I wanted to do is I wanted to touch, as we close out this particular episode, on the 4 doctrines of love, okay? The 4 doctrines of love, we're basically talking about the philosophies of love that come from the Greek school of thought between Plato and Aristotle. So, I love giving you some backdrop and some education, because when you are saying these things, I want you to say it with some confidence, and I want you to come across with that intelligence that I know that you have, because you know the history, that we not just talking, that we also can reinforce with actual research that we've done. So the 4 love doctrines and philosophies have a base from the school of Plato and Aristotle. Now, Plato is, of course, that famous Greek philosopher. He created and founded the first institution of higher learning in the Western world, and he wrote what's called the Symposium of Love. So he wrote what's called the Symposium of Love, Plato did, and that was the basis for how we understand the doctrines of philosophies of love. Then Aristotle, who actually is a student of the school of Plato, he came, and our brother Aristotle took it a little bit further and said, okay, I want to refine it, which is what great researchers do. So Aristotle came along and said, okay, well, I'm going to add a little bit more to it and make what's called the Nicomachean ethics and how to best achieve happiness and love. So Aristotle came and he just put an extra layer on it. So basically these 4 doctrines, which you all have heard, but I just want to touch on it for the brevity of time and for our final episode, so that you can understand that we can love people based on those 12 attributes, but the doctrine in which we love them will have a lot to do with the impact of how thorough our love can be for them. So let's go through those very quickly for the brevity of time. The 4 doctrines are based on these 4 philosophies. Number 1, and this is kind of the order, the hierarchy that I see as far as the most primal to the one that's closest to God, okay? The most primal is eros. And when we talk about the eros doctrine of love, what we're basically saying is sexual love, feelings of arousal that are shared between people who are physically attracted to one another, or a romantic love, okay? So that's eros. That's the first discipline of love that I want to educate us about. The second one is philia, or think of Philadelphia. Philadelphia is known as the city of brotherly love. So philia is a friend or close relationship love that's most often exhibited in close relationships, brotherly love. So you can think of your friends would fit the philia discipline rather of love. The next one is storge, which is a natural familial based love. So basically the love that a husband and wife would have, a son and father would have, a mother and son. So it's a family-based love, okay? So that's the third doctrine of love. Now the fourth one is one that we hear a lot about in our churches. If we're learning biblical principles, we should be. The fourth one is agape. We hear it, but this is the hardest level to get to because agape is literally a God-like love. It is a self-sacrificing love that focuses on the will to love, not the emotions or the experience or libido. It's the love God shows to his people. So what we want to do is we want to look at who do we love, who they are to us, and under what doctrine are we loving them. Case in point, say in my marriage, my wife being my wife, I can love her from literally all four of these different disciplines. I can love her in an eros way because it's a romantic love. I can love her from a phileo way because of our relationship as far as being brothers and sisters in Christ. I can love her from a storge perspective because that's my wife. There's a family love that's there. But then the ultimate charge is how do I love her in an agape regard? How do I love her the way that God would? And that's the self-sacrificing love, which means, again, if you do nothing for me, it is a privilege to be able to love you in return. If nothing else is done, let me love like God, let me love like Christ, okay? Now, if you have a best friend, you wouldn't love your best friend from an eros discipline, but you definitely would love them from a philia regard. You can also possibly love in a storge regard because it can be like family, but still, you still have the agape dynamic. You still have that agape to go to. So no matter how you love a person, the goal is to try to get as close to agape as possible. And that's the goal, is to try to get to that self-sacrificing, selfless love in the manner in which God gives us.
Pastor Frank Thomas said something that's so vital in preparing for
Yes.
worship service. He
Yes.
said the people have to take away something. He said, first of all, the liturgy is the people. It's about the people. It's the people
Absolutely.
speaking. So he said it has to, either the people leave. He said, I want them to leave with hope. And that hope can be from the sermon. It can be from the music. It can be from the offertory. It can be from the scripture reading. It can be
Absolutely.
from prayer. Whatever part, but they need to leave with hope.
In the society that we were brought up in, it's very hard on little black boys. You have to navigate feelings and emotions so the world don't get you.
Sometimes when I cry, I won't know how I'm feeling or why I'm crying.
I just grew up never feeling like it was okay to cry.
Yeah.
And so he really forced me to have to reconnect with the kid that didn't get to cry.
That's beautiful.
We don't cry, we gon' take our piece of the pie.
Why do you believe that so many women are going into entrepreneurship, and why did you go into it?
Because it's necessary. That's what we do. We make ways out of no ways.
For me, I went into it because I had reached a certain level when I was in corporate America where I couldn't go any further.
When you look at corporate America, we're disenfranchised. We're always at the bottom of the totem pole. We're constantly having to be on and work on eggshells. That's not fulfillment for everyone.
All right, so that kind of sums up all of the principles of love. It was a lot to go over. It was really challenging to kind of deviate and kind of keep everything in the middle of the road. But I wanted to make sure that we ended this episode talking about love, because we started talking about forgiveness. And if we're going to start talking about forgiveness, then it's only fitting that we end it in love. So we talked about the 12 attributes of love that are right there in the Bible. So go and spend some time. Go and spend some time with it. Let it speak to you and minister to you right there. 1 Corinthians 13, 4-8. Ask yourself the question, am I loving the people that I say I love right? But then are the people that I love loving me right in return? What are the areas in my life that I can improve on in terms of making certain that I'm loving the way God said, and I have an understanding of it, that when I say that I love someone, it's saying that I'm going to do these 12 things for you, and you don't give me anything in return, and I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it because I love you. I want us to really understand the principles of that word and to make sure that we are not just loving right, but that we're being loved right. It's only fitting that as we close out this episode, just allow me to say to each and every one of you, I love you. And I thank you so much for the support and just the opportunity. And I just want to take time to just thank my church family here at House of Hope Atlanta, Greater Travelers Rest, and all those that came before me right here in my home community, right here. If you don't know, we're right here based in South DeKalb County in Decatur, Georgia, as we say on this side, in Decatur where it's greater. And in this community, it cultivated me. I went to school right down the street, Rainbow Elementary, former special education student that had a speech impediment. But it's amazing what God does and how he cultivates and calls and qualifies his own. I went to school right down the street here, Southwest DeKalb, where my sense of community was really cultivated. This church right here was in South DeKalb, and it cultivated a community involvement. So it's all I knew. And even when I went off to Alabama to go to school, I always took that with me. And I never turned my back on that, and I never will. So I love this church. I love this community because it spawned me. Reverend H.F. Shepherd, my spiritual father. I would be so out of place to not recognize him, and all of us that grew up under Greater Travelers Rest, all of us have gone on to be mighty pillars and titans of the faith because that generation loved us. And it's continued here at the House of Hope Atlanta, and it will continue to for years to come until God comes back. So there's a lot of love here at this church. There's a lot of love here at this network, and we feel it from you all. And it's only right that I say from the production team here to say thank you. Benton Aladdin, thank you so much, brother, for the opportunity to serve. For all the guys here behind, there's some great gentlemen here that are here every time we come to record. And I want to thank Terrence, Torrance, Cal, and I forgot the other brother's name, charges to my head and not my heart, but thank you, brother, so much for what you do. If nobody else says thank you for showing up and operating in your gift and for allowing little black kid from Compton, California, the opportunity to be used by God and have this platform. I never take it for granted. It's only right in closing that I say thank you to my wife, LaToya, and I want to say thank you for your support. My wife is so much of a blessing. And a lot of times when I'm up writing, she's so patient and she gives me feedback on things. And God has been truly good to me. And when God says to you that he who findeth a wife findeth a good thing, his word does not come back void. That is truly, truly, truly true, because I truly have indeed found my good thing, and it makes everything worth it. I want to close this episode with the It Only Be Right. I have my sons with me. And I want to ask my sons with the few times we have, Jameson and Gabriel, can y'all come up here? My sons mean the world to me. I had the opportunity to be the father of two boys, and just want to share a little bit of my family with you all. This is my youngest, Jameson, and this is my oldest, Gabriel. And God has been so good to us. This church has played a great role in that. My journey as a single father, these boys really grounded me and kept me praying and helped me to be mindful of everything that I had to be thankful for and really what love is in this capacity. It's a blessing to be able to have them and to be able to show them what godly love looks like from a male perspective. And if God did it for me, he'll do it for you. And so because of the love that God has shown me, the love he's shown my family, the love he shows his church and his network, we're committed to you. We're committed to your development and your growth as individuals, because it's truly my desire for you to have everything God has promised you, because he has given me all that I've asked for. And I pray that every episode that you watch, that you see that, and that as I share that gift with you all, that he will be projected on you. So we're going to close out season 6. We'll be back for season 7. Hope it's okay to share. Benton, they've told me they're going to give us an hour for season 7. So we're going to have a whole hour, some new formats of how we're going to address things. But I'm so humbled by the opportunity to be back in you all's presence. And so we're already writing and cultivating that. And so thank you all. Because of your support, we'll have that opportunity to extend our time and literally the prayer of Jabez coming to fruition, because God has truly blessed and increased our territory. So with that being said, from my family, from my legacy, to you all, as we always do at the end, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May he turn his love and smile and countenance towards you. And may he give you peace. Thank you all so much. God bless, and we'll do it again season 7. Thank y'all.